We're trying to create this world of network synergy, unity within this renewable development, and being able to have different verticals that collaborate and work together, even if it's somebody from the very origination to somebody that's going to be in operation. How do we help bridge the gap? And we just try to make those connections.
Welcome to the Land Department Podcast, the state of land and energy as we see it.
Brent, what does 2R Group stand for?
Oh, let me count the ways. No, it's 2R. It's Ryndi and Rebecca. It's a couple of title ladies we met, consultants we met, months ago, and been working together. And we just started having so many great conversations, laughing, cutting up, going down all kinds of wormholes, some appropriate, some not. And finally, I proposed to him. I said, "Would you be on my little podcast?" And we had a good laugh about it. I told him we have 12 fans, and they're all of our mothers. Essentially, Yep. Those are the only people that follow. But it was just always too good a conversation to not try to put a podcast together. So, Ryndi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. We're looking forward to this fun conversation.
Yeah, we're sad that Rebecca couldn't make it. How would you introduce Rebecca if you could?
Rebecca is a man. She has a wealth of expertise and experience that none of us, and probably a whole football team, will never accomplish. She has a level of understanding of the utility industry, and unlike I've never seen anybody have such intellect and be so clear. And she's just a powerhouse. She's very well organized. She's a mighty little warrior is what she is.
She is. She's also a chicken because she didn't want to come on the podcast with us. She said, "You guys are land folks. I can't contribute here." And we were like, "You contribute more than you think."
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, she's great.
We have a couple of different verticals. How Rebecca and I came together is that we both worked at a commercial renewable development company. And I worked on the front side, what we call the front or origination side, and built the real estate and insurance team and did a lot of the early stage development. And I was also the closer when they purchased land, and did a lot of that early stage diligence. Rebecca came on deck and was the asset manager for the, pre-construction and construction, post-construction operational projects. This company had, over about 300 projects that were operational that she was responsible for managing. So we both came from two different sides of this development area. And when we both left, we knew that we really had this origination to operation experience in the life cycle of a development. So Ryndi and Rebecca came together to do all things renewable and real estate. So that's the 2R group and the double entendre for the 2R when we came together. So we both bring together a lot that sometimes meets in the middle. A lot of times it overlaps. But she does, as Brent said, she brings a lot to the table. So she's missed, but we'll have to punk her a couple of times during the show.
That's right. No, and we came across, were introduced to Rebecca and Ryndi through a contact that we made at Dudley through a developer, and Paul ended up leaving and working with Ryndi and Rebecca, helping them out on some of their jobs, and connected us. And so, like I said earlier, we really just kind of hit it off. Our companies, they intermingle a lot, and we've been able to help them out on some projects. And they've been able to help us to have a clear understanding of the needs of our clients on the development side. So, it's been really, really good to work with the ladies, and excited to have you on today and kind of talk about a little title.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Well, tell us a little bit about the renewable space a bit more. A lot of our listeners are probably in the oil and gas space. We do have some listeners in the renewable space, but just give us a little introduction into what the most pressing challenges are as development and resources get poured into the renewables space going forward, what do you see as the most pressing things to be aware of?
With all development, and I'll say this not just for renewable, but a developer has a target, and it's the target of what they're going to develop, their improvement, whether that's a commercial property, a house, a pipeline, and their eye is always on that prize. So when I'm talking to a renewable developer, their eye is on that wire. Their eye is on the prize of the connection to the utility. And when you start talking to them about the ground, the subsurface, the earth, it's not in their wheelhouse. So the biggest challenge is to educate your client and educate the actual person that needs it about why they need it and how important it is. So a lot of times I've had this conversation that it's kind of the chicken or the egg thing. Your development will not be worth anything until you vet the land. Well, your land's not worth anything until I develop something on it. So there's that balance that you have to have with your client to help them understand the importance, and especially the higher the value of the improvement, the higher the risk. That means the more important the land vetting and the title work is. So that's always my biggest challenge, is that title is not sexy in development land. It's a monetary drain sucker out of everybody's, wind out of everybody's sail. You don't normally on a title, when you're working in a title vertical, you're not, when they see you coming into a conference room, everybody, tries to go like this because they know that you're going to say something that is going to cost them money or is a problem. We don't come in saying everything's great with your title. So that's the other part of swimming upstream, and also being in an industry. Title is an industry that is not well received by a developer. It's a cost of doing business. It's a unfortunate thing that they need to have. And unfortunately, for a lot of developers, not just in renewable, but in any development, title is something that they think is just a checkbox. It's a thing I need, a commitment that I need to have, and I'm going to check it off. And even though there's a nuclear bomb inside that commitment, they've checked it off their list and they think that they can move on. Actually, they've lit the fuse to whoever has enough intellect or understands the complexities of that bomb when they open it up, So that's my biggest challenge, is to educate the clients along the way that these things are necessary. Title is really important. And it is the one thing that I can tell you that my job I'll never have a lack of job, because title is always going to be required with any developer. It doesn't matter. Build a circus on the property, you need title.
That's right. And the challenges and the pain points that Ryndi pointed out is exactly probably what started y'all's company. I mean, there's a need, there's a certain amount of, to Ryndi's point, it's people who are working for developer companies, they're thinking about the prize, right? Build a solar project connected to the grid. And there's a checkbox that says, okay, somebody says I have to do title. Let's do that. And the complexities are just, it can go from a little complex to to nuclear before you know it. And so, Ryndi, maybe explain a little bit about what you guys do, like cradle to grave. What's your process? How do you, especially from the title standpoint, where do you come in? Where does 2R start?
So we have our guys, our smaller, our first original developers of these projects. We lovingly call them the two guys in a truck. They're usually the guys that are knocking on the doors, and they're the ones that I hold a lot of stock in these projects, because they're the ones that start the dream. They're the ones that see that wire, and they're not looking at the land particularly yet, only for the virtue of where it's located, right? But they're the ones that start that dream of the project. They are the ones that originate the leases. And those clients will come to us either prior to getting the site control, meaning purchase contract, lease, LOI. They will come to us sometimes and say, hey, I want to pull a deed. Now, these are the clients that we've tried to educate that it's super important, because more times than not, they knock on the door and introduce themselves, and the person at the door says, "Hi, my name is Will Smith," and they have this conversation. And sometimes what happens is that site control gets executed, and then they hand me the signed contract before they've done any diligence, like even pulling a title. They've taken the landowner's word for it. They've looked at the county's GIS and decided that Will Smith is the guy's name. And then I get a title quote for them. We send the search out. This is the variable too, is that an uneducated or uninformed developer has in the past just ordered title, and they'll go by just the normal standards of what title is. So they'll call a title company and say, "Hey, we need a title." They're going by their checkbox, and title will say, "Yeah, great, title." And they'll only do a search for a 30-year or a minimally required search back. But that is not enough for financing. That is not enough for insurability for the solar development. So there's been times that my clients, those early stage developers, will come to me and say, "Here's my lease and here's my title commitment. Can you tell me what's wrong? A, you're not in the right. The lease is under Will Smith, and the guy's name is William John Smith III. So you're out of site control because his name is not correct. But B, the search is not far enough back. That this is not an acceptable enough search." So we are, to our group, we're trying very hard to change that checklist that has been circulated in days of yore that everybody continues to go by. And sometimes there's a lot of times that in my vertical of land diligence, the cart has been put in front of the horse. Like, guys, we need to do the deed pull first. Then we're going to know who we're going into the lease with. We're going to ask questions like, do you have debt on this property? Are you going to go into default if you enter site control with me because your lender doesn't allow you to go into anything that secures the property? Those questions, excuse me, were not being asked because there was this gold rush of renewable energy, and it was about getting that site control under contract. And the minute that checkbox was done, the developer can then go and get in line and apply for that utility connection, that PPA, even though they're not in site control with the right person. They don't have some complexities. And so then it's kind of like clean up on aisle 5 the minute that the title comes in, that we're saying you're out of site control. You need an amended and restated lease. We've got to do this. We've got to, get an MOL recorded. So we're trying to help the early stage developers be better developers, help them have a monetary value of vetting the project a little better by, when they sell these projects, those early stage developers sometimes just sell the lease and say, "I've tied up this land." It's monetarily worth more money when it's with the right landowner, when that buyer's not going to have to amend and restate something, when an MOL has already been recorded and you're just purchasing the correct membership interest. So we're trying to educate those landowner or those developers that are doing early stage. Then we continue to, I call it, ride the solar coaster, that we're trying to connect ourselves with these projects because of our experience from origination to operation, that the buyers of those projects we try to also contract with. They see that our group has been working on the title. There's 25 things that still need to be mitigated, and we help them continue that to the point that we're contracted with the developer that ends up taking it to notice to proceed, or NTP. We help them. I work with the surveyors and the engineers to help design the site and adhere to the title complexities, and help the lenders and the project owners obtain their title policies for those projects as it goes through milestone. And then Rebecca's standing there with her big catcher's mitt, that most of these projects are sold to one or more of the clients that we work for from an asset management perspective. So these are projects that once they get under operation, they're sold pretty heavily. It's a pooled commodity that these projects are sold quite often, especially in the first couple of years of operation. And they end up at our camp where we're actually the asset manager. So we have a lot of intel of that project. In a 3 to 5 year period, we've watched that project go from it being 2 leases and the 2 guys in the truck brought the project to us, to it going through these phases of milestones and developers till it was built and now it's in operation. So that's what 2R does.
That's it. And she's exactly right. I mean, I think when you see this pattern over and over again, and the same mistakes being made and the same hurdles you have to jump when you maybe have a buyer on the line, God, we look at these issues and say, man, it could be prevented. And it so easily could be prevented. And that's a lot of what we do, and the work and the conversations we have with Ryndi and her group is, when can you get, what steps in the process can you take early to minimize those risks? When the 2 guys in the truck are out negotiating leases, there's a lot of intel that you can do on the title side of things in a very short amount of time to decide, hey, you know what? Maybe this prize isn't as shiny as we think it is. Maybe, yeah, it's under the line, it meets all these things, but you've got a mineral bomb, or, there's a lien against the property that you're going to have to figure out. All those things, it's a constant reminder and education of our clients of, hey, you can avoid some of these things if you do certain things in advance. And that's kind of where our mineral work comes in with Ryndi and her team as well.
Absolutely. That's what I was just going to say, is that where we started working together is that we have projects that are on, prospective or suspected mineral sites, so that we know that there's severance in those projects. And there's times that the title company will require a subsurface search based upon an initial search of surface, or just on a known fact, like this is a high level of mineral interest. So the title company will allow us to, or allow the client, I should say, to engage their own landman to go out and do that subsurface search. And this is one thing that I wanted to highlight that Brent and I have talked about that I think is really important to understand, is that there's a huge difference in the way that gas and oil searches and mitigates their title, their actual land, or the subsurface issues, than renewable energy does. Renewable energy wasn't used to having subsurface issues. Like I said, they hardly look at the ground itself, much less think about that there's issues that would be subsurface. And so their checkbox is to get a commitment, because they know that that's what is necessary, but they didn't, and they still haven't made this conscious understanding that by getting that title commitment and putting it in a data room for a potential buyer to see, they're actually and potentially highlighting a problem. Now, gas and oil people, this is the thing that Brent and I have had conversations about, which I think that the renewable energy should adapt a little bit of this logic to, is that they hire a qualified landman, especially when they know that this is going to have subsurface issues, and they go out and do that search, and they mitigate those things that they find along the way, that they're internally, as a company, as a developer, with the coordination of this vendor, of a qualified landman, going through the diligence and vetting that issue before they throw that landmine to the title company. And then I cannot emphasize this point more. An underwriter has a huge amount of responsibility. They're ensuring risk, and that's the last thing that a title underwriter wants, is to have a title claim. So if a searcher brings them a scrap of risk, and I mean a scrap, that is just magnified by that underwriter, and that underwriter hangs on to that scrap forever until even after that policy is purchased. So there is really a good reason for the renewable industry to take note of how gas and oil has done it, where they do the searches and they do some mitigation, and they do not allow the title company or the underwriter to get that nasty taste in their mouth from whatever that defect was. That it's not that they don't have to see it. Nobody's hiding anything. It's that we searched this. There was a very big gap in airship. We drilled down. We found the missing person. We figured this out. Yes, half of the interest was, lost in a poker game, but we found that guy and he's given us the quick claim, rather than everybody always thinks an underwriter thinks the worst case scenario. Again, all you have to do is give them a scrap. So I really feel like that's where Brent and I are and will start to change the industry and help our clients be educated about there's a better way to do this without having the complications of title being involved. And so that I just wanted to point out that what a huge difference it was for me to learn about how gas and oil handled it. And then for you guys, for all the gas and oil people, to learn how the renewable industry was handling it. They were kind of letting the bombs go off and hoping that they could get these things figured out.
Yeah. It's all about marketability and efficiency, right? If you've gone down the line 2 years with your solar lease, and now you're going to try to get this deal sold, or you're wanting to move into development construction, and you don't know what issues you have there, and then you hit a bomb, and then it costs you a deal. It costs you time. It costs you another 6-8 months to get something cleaned up. You've lost that advantage. Maybe somebody else has slid in and been able to get their deal done ahead of you. Maybe you lost a sale because this thing is not marketable because you have 200 mineral owners. And Ryndi's right. It really boils down to how pretty can this package be when you send it to your underwriter, right? How clean is it? Have you identified the issues and fixed them? And that's kind of one of the things that is different. Ryndi mentions there's a checklist, and you kind of go through these steps and you work through it. And that's all fine. It'll get you there some of the time until it doesn't, until it costs you a ton or you can't get your deal done. In oil and gas, she's right. We typically are able to fix those problems going before we put a bit in the ground to drill an oil and gas well. We're doing research. We do title curative on every run sheet that we prepare in an oil and gas project. And landmen are very well adept to be able to do that curative. We do nothing but airship affidavits day in and day out. We do possession affidavits on the surface. We're finding people, we're securing oil and gas leases. And how that translates to the renewable side is we're identifying those issues. We're fixing those gaps. We're providing probate in another county in our rent sheet that wouldn't have been received otherwise. If you just do your traditional kind of surface title run. And we're able to pull all that stuff together. And hopefully what you want to strive for is for your development clients, your solar developer clients, is to be able to have a high success rate. Like, if they're going to buy a lease on a piece of land, it obviously checks all the boxes for interconnection and getting that product into the grid. But man, if you can get them to where they're each one of these jobs is getting done and getting to construction or getting sold successfully and efficiently, that's what you want to strive for. The difference primarily is tolerance for spending, right?
You're making a good point, because the thing that I've tried to tell the renewable developers about this aspect is that you almost are setting yourself up for extortion. And I mean that directly and bluntly, that they sign the lease, they apply for the interconnection. And in some markets, those interconnection applications, just so that everybody knows what kind of dollar amounts that we're talking about, literally, they've just signed the lease and they haven't done any diligence. It's with Will Smith, not the correct landowner. Then they go and apply, and they will spend $850,000 and above on one application for their project. And then the other diligence of, the phase ones or, the wetland delineations, all of those other big spends, those are really big spends. So within a very short period of time, before they even have title work done, a project could have a spend of over a few $1,000,000. So then to me, that puts that investment and that onus of seeing that project get built more to that developer. So then when you say to them, now you've got this problem that you've got to go to 55 different subsurface owners and you're going to have to pay them. Well, they've already spent over $2.5 million. Their spend is like every day, ding, 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 ding. That's all they hear is ching, 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 ching. So those landowners, those subsurface owners, anybody that they have to buy something from or get something from, they're more willing. I mean, they wouldn't admit this, but subconsciously or consciously, however you want to look at it, they have to be more willing to pay because of the spend that they already have.
Yeah.
And the higher that spend, which is crazy to me, the higher the spend, the higher that they're willing to pay. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, I'm in the wrong business. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's the game that they play. And when now I've tried to educate those developers, the first two phase developers, that by you getting that project, that land, the title, what I'm going to call policy ready, not shovel ready.
Yeah.
Look at the value, because then you could come back to them and say, I saved potentially millions of dollars in subsurface waiver fees. I saved because you caught that before you spent so much money. And that, it's kind of like when you go in to buy a car, you have to be willing to I don't really want to buy it. See you later. Yeah. Have a nice day. But if you go in there needing a car and you cannot leave that place without a car, you'll end up paying way more than you can afford for that car.
And it's just a vicious cycle. I mean, you just keep throwing good money at that. It's a very vicious
cycle that they set themselves up for.
Yeah, it really is. And it can be avoided. We get it all the time. I mean, we put out 4 or 5 quotes for mineral tile a week. Very easily, we do one a day around here. And, we'll lose a bid over $1,000, right? It happens all the time. And when the fact is, in 2 weeks' time, you can run your mineral title, know what your exposure is, know if you have any other issues hiding and lurking before you spend your $200,000, $300,000, $800,000 for your permitting to move forward. And even, for a matter of fact, before you even buy that lease, that title and that work can be done if you've engaged with the right group that is there and you're partnering with that group and you put it at the forefront as, hey, this is marketable title is an important part of this process. You can't get to the finish line.
It's the change of the checklist.
Yeah.
That's what has to happen here. It's the change of the checklist, because we all see how it, both sides see how this can unfold detrimentally. And every project that doesn't do it, in my opinion, a more correct way or early diligence way, you can't even quantify the amount of money of extra spend on that project, because title wasn't the focus wasn't initially on title. But that's the problem. Here lies the problem of development. Yeah. Title is not the number one factor, and that's not the stopgap. I have a couple of great clients that have become very enlightened, and we now have this, the pen doesn't work until the deed pool has been done. So unless that executive has seen that to our group has done some early stage diligence, meaning a deed pool that we know for sure we're going into, at least right now, the right person, his pen now has gone dry. His ink is gone dry. And that's like euphoric for me, because now he sees that he went back after 3 months and he goes, I really see monetarily how you have saved us money, because I'm not signing so many amendment and restatements. I'm not having to sign so many extensions for landowners. I'm not having to sign as many things. And it's also part of the problem with this gold rush, right? So this is something else that we were talking about. It's really interesting how developers, when they see that wire or they've been given an initiative, all of us know that the United States has passed a huge um, environment or energy initiative that is giving a lot of incentives to renewable energy, and it created another one of these waves of gold rush. And getting in line in these queues for the utility applications sometimes takes years. Like the utilities will take years to do the studies, or it'll take you. So their biggest hope is to hurry up and get in that line. And if that line means getting side control with Will Smith and then hurrying up and cleaning up that aisle on 5, that's worth it to them. So they create exceptions to the rules because of the utility lines, the lines that they have to get into. And again, back to this focus on their development. There's been times where we've been working for a long time on early stage development on a project, and it looks great, and then they're like, "Oh, the utility report didn't come back, good, favorable, so we're killing this deal." So all the other variables are there. The land is good, the landowner's great. There was a title policy before, everything's wonderful, and then they're like,
It
"Oh,
still
sorry,
fall apart.
the queue is too full, so we're not working on this project again."
Yeah.
So trying to come up with that balance, I know from a renewable from their side is hard. However, the other thing that we've done in this gold rush in development and the developers trying to get these incentives is that we've also screwed up market values and lease rate values, and those kind of things have impacted a lot of communities. That has put a really bad taste of renewable energy in a lot of local farmers or local families' mouths, because of the fact that in the endeavor of getting that side control and checking that box, the developers of yore paid triple what land values were, triple what lease rates were, in order to get it off the street. And the sad part about it is that that lease was sold 4 or 5 times. So that initial person that went and said to that landowner, "Hello, I'm going to be your partner for 40 years and we're going to be buddies," he doesn't even remember his name anymore.
Yeah.
So that's saturated the respect, I think, and also the viability of this industry that needs to be changed. That these people, it's their land, that it has value to it. They need to be respected. They need to be a party to this lease for 40 years. And so handling these people, whether you need to get something from them and not letting them extort you, and also making them a party to the project, is a super important thing in this, that sometimes also is a missing ingredient in some of the cakes that get baked out here.
Yeah. It's kind of the unfortunate consequence of competition, right? We see
Yes.
we've seen it in oil and gas for 120 years. We've seen it in cell phone towers, years back. You see it in the pipeline industry and right-of-way industry. It's how these things work. And there is a land grab, and that's the balance that we're really trying to meet is, hey, you don't want to slow down your land grab. You have to have site control.
Mm-hmm.
But how can we make informed, educated decisions about pulling the trigger on site control while maximizing our potential and actually get this deal to the finish line? And that's what we all try to do is to try to be able to provide a service, provide a product, minimize risk, and be a partner to help our developer clients get to the finish line. And for us as a company, that where our success has been is where you can really have that partnership.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going out and getting bids for a $7,000 title project. It's hey, Dudley Land or whatever broker, you're going to be you're going to be our land department. These are our goals and objectives. You're going to work with our acquisition team, and before the pen gets wet to be able to sign, you're going to have checked these boxes. And the fact is, all that work can be done very quickly and reasonably priced and get you to the point where you sign that check or you sign that lease, you have some confidence, or at least you know what you're getting into. Prime example, a client of ours reached out to us this week. Hey man, do you have a contact with Blackstone? Blackstone's one of the biggest monster timber companies. Oh, they actually co-develop oil and gas projects as well. And they're asking me about if I've got a contact that can help them, maybe talk about getting a waiver on their mineral interest. Well, the fact of the matter is I didn't want to tell him. I told him very nicely, I wouldn't expect to get a mineral waiver from Blackstone Minerals. They're a major timber company. They're a major oil and gas developer on both sides. And there's no telling how much money's been spent to get to that point to, give them the bad news. So there's all those things, right? And it could have been an avoided thing. And, ultimately, again, you see those with any kind of new industry. When you have land grabs, people take risk. Do I have land or do I have good land? And ultimately,
I've never seen so much risk since I was at Vegas last weekend.
it's unbelievable. And
they take big risks. They win big, but they take very big risks.
They can also lose big.
Belief.
They can lose big. And ultimately, we've had this conversation too, Ryndi, about, we're in a very early stage relatively in this solar development initiative. The wind space was where we are now in solar 15 years ago. And when you look at the wind players in the business right now, you got a few majors, right? And they operate efficiently. They make smart decisions. They've learned these lessons, and we experience it because we work with them. They're hiring us to do these things earlier in the process than a lot of our solar clients are, or at least the ones we can't get to quickly enough to inform and educate and get them comfortable with spending a little bit of money. This is your pre-insurance insurance.
That's right.
A little bit of investment can help you make a smart deal and buy a project that you can get to the finish line. So it will get there, and ultimately the solar space will mature. It will consolidate the most efficient and best operators and best funded groups that are making smart decisions and are able to get the most projects built are going to be the ones that survive. And hopefully we'll be right there with them, and we'll have a little part in helping them make good decisions.
Well, that's the beauty, is that this industry title will always be a necessity. It's not anybody's top favorite priority by any stretch, but I think that, again, the vetting of the title, the vetting of the land, as a renewable development and developers become more educated, they're going to see monetarily, like there's going to be some algorithm that's going to be started that they're going to start to see that, wow, it really does pay off. That whole saying that, probably every one of our grandmothers said, you can pay now or pay later. They're going to start to realize that early spend of, say, a couple of $1,000s for a title search, even a preliminary search, was worth the money than to wait until you had all those factors that we've talked about. The fact that you've got to go back to a landowner, you have to do a subsurface search, you might have to pay them for surface waivers or try to buy their rights, all of those things. This kind of also reminds me of another thing that was out of a checklist mentality that, again, somebody, I wish I could get their name and number because I would have a conversation with them about who wrote this checklist. But
shame on you.
Yeah.
Mr. Checklist person.
That's
Not
right.
you, Ryndi.
There are certain counties that require, so for you to go into getting a permit, you have to provide them with a title commitment, and then everyone that has interest has to be sent a letter, and you have to show that county that you've noticed anybody that has interest that you're going to be developing, that you're applying for a permit, whether it's a driveway permit or building permit, something like that. So what I found out, I didn't know how out of cycle or out of sync the cycle was. I had several of my clients going, where's my title commitment? And I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. But who was asking me for it in their dev shop was somebody that was not who I thought should be asking me for a commitment. So I'm like, aren't you on zoning? Why are you, zoning person, asking me for a commitment? Zoning person said, because I have to give this commitment to the zoning department and send out these letters. And I said, but you understand that that commitment has subsurface interests. So you're telling me that you're sending it to, they had the MOR, they have all the contacts of everybody that we were going to have to go out for surface waivers for, but they sent letters out to these surface interest owners and to the fee owners. No, because the surface, we're in contract with them. They're our landlord.
Yeah.
Right. But these subsurface owners were getting this letter that would say, hey, we're coming to your our interest soon, and we're going to be building, and we just thought we'd let you know. So when we come for a piece of paper, we'll be sure to have our checkbook out. Hey. So I didn't realize that. And when I sent it to my developer just like that, they were like, oh my gosh, that I didn't even connect. They were just doing what the county had told them. This is part about doing what you're being told, right? And not understanding how it affects a different vertical. That I said, so now when I go knocking on this guy's door, he's going to, I will be thinking that I'm knocking on this subsurface interest door for the first time. Hello, how you doing? Here's my baked cookies. We'd like you to sign a surface waiver. Or no, they've got my letter and they see solar all over it and they're waiting for me to come with my checkbook.
I don't care about your cookies. Give me a check.
Right. So just the slight change in that process, what we did was I said, how about this? How about let's change the verbiage to those subsurface interests? I'm not saying that you don't have to check that box, but let's change something that says, we know what your interest is. So that's the other thing. They were just blindly saying, we know you have an interest. There's a big difference in having a conversation with somebody that has a 95% interest and somebody that has a 0.00002% interest. You know what I mean? So now that I'm telling you, Mr. Subsurface Owner, I know you only have a 0.002% interest. We're going to be coming to you and talking to you about a surface waiver. And if you don't want to sign it, then we'll give you a specific piece of land for you to continue your rights for us to co-locate. And trying to have some verbiage in that letter that indicates that I'm not just coming with my checkbook. And that was a game changer because those projects, there was like 4 or 5 projects that we couldn't figure out why the spend was so high. We're like, why did this project go so over budget? And we're like,
yeah, they had time.
Well,
to think
we had
about
to
it.
spend, $80,000 on surface waivers.
Yeah.
So the difference in that notification, the communication with that surface, just like you said, Brent, there's a lot of times with a timber company, they're not signing a surface waiver or they're not selling you the right. Like you're going to have to figure out something else. That's not a monetary thing that you're going to get from them. There's no dollar amount that you could budget for that.
Yeah. And that's
that's the same thing for Aunt Betsy. She could hold that same card and prevent your project from being developed with having that one holdout that has a huge interest, so they just don't realize the gamble that they take in that notification.
And one of the things that we're experiencing as well is some of our developer clients just assume that, well, why wouldn't they sign a waiver? Why wouldn't they do it? Well, the fact is there's a monetary value associated with mineral interest, especially in oil and gas producing states. Texas, obviously, is where I'm at. It's my backyard. We see a ton. If you don't know about minerals development and oil and gas development in Texas, you've been in a hole somewhere.
Right.
And so, it kind of goes back to where does this title process start? You can do this very early in your process as a developer for minimal cost comparatively, and help you make decisions. You don't have to buy a surface lease on a parcel of land that has 50 owners. Or maybe has Blackstone under it, right? You can make that decision early on because you're not going to get that waiver and therefore you're not going to get time to writing. It's just assume, understand it, accept it, move on. But you can make that decision years or months in advance, as opposed to getting so far down the line and realize that, oh God, what do we do? And then what do? You continue to throw good money at bad. And it's just a vicious cycle. So, one of how we're trying to negate that, how we're trying to get ahead of that with the clients that we work with, more in a partnership is hey, we're going to do this title ahead of time. We're going to be able, very cursory research, help you identify or at least make an informed decision. Yeah, before you sign that lease or you pay for that service lease, you're going to know how much of the mineral interest that surface owner controls. So by virtue of securing that surface lease, you've then secured a waiver on X percentage of your mineral rights, essentially. So, we target tracts that have high mineral interest associated with the surface ownership. All that work can be done very early in the process, especially if you feel, really good about being able to get your interconnect and get your permitting and all that stuff put together. So, it's just, again, moving certain parts of your examination up the checklist can really, just
You're
an
making
ounce of
a really good
prevention, talking about
Yeah,
grandma saying.
you're making a really, really good point that needs to be made here. So as I said, there's a lot of title companies that when we go out for a quote and they know that there's subsurface interest, they'll say, we don't allow anybody else to search those subsurface. We're going to do the surface and the subsurface. We have our own internal people, our own vendors. We're not going to even tell you who they are. We have ultimate control, and all we get back is that title commitment. And those, for me, are the worst possible scenarios that I don't recommend to my client, because I have no communication with that abstractor or that land company.
You have no
And
product. You have no run
you have
sheet.
no product,
You have no
right? You can't.
documents.
That's right. You have none of that. And, like one of the projects that Brent is working on for us right now, we have had a hiccup. And here's what happened is that project got sent to a title company. And that title company, their stance is that they'll search back a certain number of years, depending on the state. So say they said that they'll search back 110 or 150 years. And if they don't find anything, meaning subsurfacely, then they would issue a commitment without a general mineral exception. And we wouldn't have to do a subsurface search. So they said, no problem, we'll do this search. And 6 months later, they said, we found all of these minerals. It's really bad. We can't finish this. They couldn't complete it. Their abstractor, or their land company, their internal person could not facilitate the job. So then we called up Trustee Dudley and said, hey, we need your help. That the title company, we actually switched title companies because that was a really big fail on that particular title company's abilities, that they couldn't even, in 6 months communicate well to us that they couldn't get this project committed and give us a commitment. So we have a new title company. We hired Dudley. We made sure that now we're in control. Dudley is engaged directly by the client. They're going to be able to deliver him the product. They're also going to be able to not only be that abstractor, that searcher that title's relying on, to give them all the documentation, but Dudley's able to take off their searcher hat and also put on their mitigator hat. Like, wow, we just found this document. And if right now we get this person to sign off on this and record something, this isn't an issue. Going back to how we were talking earlier about how gas and oil mitigate first before they submit to title. So Dudley's doing that for us, and we see already the difference, because that we know now why that project was so hard is because Dudley's been out there working, and they're like, oh, wow, yes, there's a very big problem on this. Now we have enough information with Dudley that we can go back to the client and say, this isn't something that title would have given them either. Title would have waited to throw the bomb on them when they finished this problem. But Dudley is saying, guys, we really do have a problem. Let's talk about it.
This is how you can fix it.
Because if you don't want to fix it, let's cut this piece of property off now, or let's let you know this black hole is there, or let's try to do what we can to fix it now. We wouldn't have had those conversations with the title company. So Dudley, in the case that he's working for renewable energy, in this particular case with this client, he's actually wearing two hats. There's two lanes of revenue for him on a search aspect that he's delivering that search to the title company. and he's going to help mitigate whatever is necessary that the client can't handle, or the client needs advice on, or the client needs guidance on. There's a variable of those services. Like, hey, what would you do? There's a lot of clients that want to take that, personal approach. Like, I don't want you guys to talk to my landowner. His brother will be upset, but Dudley can prepare that surface waiver and explain what the client needs to say to that landowner and help get that mitigated. So there's a huge amount of cooperation now that is going on to mitigate this title, just by the virtue of that we're using Dudley, that we're using a land company instead of letting title control the game.
Yeah.
And it changes the whole financial and risk perspective from the title on that project.
Yeah, it's all about minimizing risk, and that's a good point to make. What we've seen, that same thing happen over and over. The Ryndi's case is not uncommon, and our side of things, and from our perspective, it's not uncommon for companies to have to wait months and months to get a title commitment. It should be done in weeks, but it's months and months. It's what spurred us to create our own title company. We just started Dudley Select Title here in Texas, and we're going to be able to go from the acquisition phase to the surface title phase, to all the mineral and mitigation work that needs to be done,
Huge.
and ultimately be able to write a title policy all in one shop, and all with a cohesive, communication line from the developer to the underwriting. And that all happens in our shop, and our customers, our clients, have access to all the information. They've got access to the rent sheets. They've got access to the mitigation work that was done. They've got access to the ownership reports. We're running these waiver projects just like we would an oil and gas leasing project, where you've got database, you've got, contact information, contact notes, you've got mapping that shows how your mineral tracts overlay and relate to your surface tracts, and where those differences might lie, and where we've secured 100% of the waivers and where we've secured 42% of the waivers. Again, efficient process. And it kind of all goes back to these same things: minimizing your risk, making efficient and smart, informed decisions, and being able to get through this process quickly when you need to, and having it be less jointed and disconnected. The more you can have this thing linear and working vertically and seamlessly with the consultants, with our developers, the better off you can be. It's an exciting thing for us. It didn't take us long to realize that there was a pain point there, and there was a problem, and there's something that we felt we could fix and be a solution. So working with Ryndi and groups like hers has been tremendous for us, because it helps us understand, okay, what are you seeing? This is all happening so fast. It's just this big intelligence thing. It's like, okay, what's wrong here? We see these problems. How do we understand the developer's perspective so that we can provide a solution? And ultimately, that's what we're all working for. And champions like Ryndi that are really trying to echo what we're saying on our end. That's why we hit it off so much. I mean, we've driven down the road and talked for a long time about this, because it's how can we articulate, our perspective, and how can we make it make sense? What examples can we show? How can we be the answer? How can we be the solution? How can ultimately we want our clients to be successful? And so does Ryndi. And if we can bring them success, well, then we're a partner and not just a vendor. And ultimately, partnerships and relationships and trust are what keep you in business, for as long as you want to be. We don't want to be a title mercenary. We want to be a partner. We want to be able to help our clients. We're a service organization, not just some vendor. And that's why the two R's and the Dudleys get along so well.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, there's a lot of alignment here, and I think that education is so important. I love that phrase, title mercenaries. I'm gonna have to save that one for the.
I've got a bunch of other phrases that probably aren't.
They don't call me Rendinator for nothing. That's my nickname, the Rendinator.
Man, that's great. Well, Ryndi, how can listeners get in touch with you about your services, about 2R Group?
My email address is Ryndi at the2rgroup.com. You can also call or email Rebecca at the2rgroup.com, Paula at the2rgroup.com. And you can give us a call. We also have our website, the2rgroup.com. Again, we have a ton of different levels of assistance that we offer to the different development stages. Paula has an amazing background in legal contractual work. We try to, that's one thing that I wanted to just emphasize. So 2Rs is again, Ryndi and Rebecca, but we, over the years in our experience as developers, have made a lot of connections with people that are very experienced, like Brent, like Paula, that we call our strategic partners. So when we're dealing with clients that need a level of expertise that maybe we cannot facilitate, or that we want to collaborate, we want to bring in somebody, hey, we have an engineer, we have a really good landman that does a lot of different types of abstracting. They can help you with your surface and your subsurface. We have a, surveyor that can facilitate. So we have gathered, and that's why we call them, they're our strategic partners. They're people that we trust, believe in, we want to work with, we want to refer, we want to help their business, they help our business. There's no competition. We all are working on these same projects. All of us have the same goal, to see more renewable energy put into the ground. We all want to work sometimes on the same project. We all don't have the same vertical. Sometimes our verticals are very similar that we can collaborate together. There's big lifts in these projects, so there's enough fish for all of us to eat. So 2R Group has a very extensive network of what we call our strategic partners for this development solar coaster that I call from origination to operation. And if 2R Group can't facilitate it, we have a strategic partner, or we know a strategic partner that can help. So that's one of the niches that we have, is that we're not somebody that believes in no competition. We don't want you to get the job. We can't do the job, so nobody should get the job kind of mentality. We want everybody to succeed in this industry. And we try to be a magnet to people like Brent, to people in the industry that have the same mindset, that there's some things that are off sync, that we all could collectively start to change the direction of this boat. We can all collectively have these kind of conversations where we're outreaching to our networks and making changes. So this is really a part of why 2R Group came together, is that we didn't want to work for any one developer. Both Rebecca and I could very successfully continue to work for one sole developer. And we really saw the niche in the fact that when we've put ourselves in a position where we don't allow our clients to put us in a non-compete environment, and we've shown those clients by the fact that we can say to them, we are working with another client in this market that this did not work out well, or this is those things that you should do. Actually, our network and our clientele actually help benefit everybody. So we're trying to create this world of network synergy, unity within this renewable development, and being able to have different verticals that collaborate and work together, even if it's somebody from the very origination to somebody that's going to be in operation. How do we help bridge the gap? And we just try to make those connections.
Yeah. And that's a great point. That the network and access to information is huge. We work for a number of clients and developers and so to Ryndi that they're not operating in just one state. They've got projects going in 15 states. And, you need a network of people who can get you to a regional expert, get you to the appropriate person that can get the job done for you in that part of the world. And that experience and exposure is huge. And that network of trusted people is a big deal. You don't want to be working. You don't want to be working off of just the cheapest quote or whatever, you might be dealing with, or you might have in front of you. You want to work with trusted partners, and you want to have someone on your side that can help guide you, through that process. And Ryndi and them do a great job. They've been a pleasure to work with. We're excited to continue to work with them. Ryndi, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, we kept it clean, which was nice. That was a positive.
I know.
We'll have you-
Right. We didn't
We'll have
throw
you back.
anybody too far under the bus today. That's for the next show.
We'll have that
That's
one
for the next one.
for the cocktail hour next time. But
Right.
Yeah.
I appreciate this too, just exactly what you're saying, that it really makes me feel great that we have some synergy and that there's an opportunity for us to start having conversations about the importance of title mitigation and helping to spread the word and educate people. So I really appreciate the opportunity, Brent. It was really, really nice to have a chat with you. I always love chatting with you.
the chats are fun.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll make it happen again soon.
Love it.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Thank
thank you
you, Ryndi.
both, and appreciate you being on the land department.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Land Department. Check out our website in the show notes or visit dudley-land.com to learn more about us.